Hello, greetings, and welcome to Teacher's Log, Video 2, Foreshadowing and Invested. That's the title of this video. And I thank my students that mentioned those two words in specific circumstances. So, this video was inspired by the same day as video 1 was, where we talked about what is a full sound, something sounding so obvious, but when you get into it, you realize, wait a minute, what is a full sound? It's not the same as big. It has nothing really to do with size. So we got into that in video 1. Well, I don't know how many times there's been videos on foreshadowing and invested with those words used in relationship to trombone playing and music. I'm sure it probably has in world history. But for me, it was a very interesting thing to hear someone say a word and another person say a word, and what it triggered in me, because different words give you different insights. And so let's talk about the foreshadowing instance. Well, this young man came in, plays very, very well. And he was going to play a Bordoni, and we had been working on different ways to connect to different things to bring out different parts of the music. So he played it for me, and it was very good. And one of the things that stuck out to me was he'd be playing along at a certain level of intensity and way, and then would all of a sudden take, in my view, kind of a quick jump to something else. And then it would kind of go back down kind of quickly. So there was a part in the middle, the bridge from one level of intensity to another, I thought was missing a bit. And we talked about it. And I made a suggestion. I said, look, why don't you think about this in a couple of different ways? You pick a couple people that you are close to and see what that does to influence the music. So he did. And he played one way and one another way. And they were both pretty doggone different. And the gaps between one level of intensity and another was better. Now, what I mean by better was you could feel why something was going into a different direction and growth, being at that place and then maybe staying there for a while with its own set of variations and then settling into something else. And that was a little bit more together on each of the variations, and they were both very, very different. Whatever person he was thinking of at first definitely was different than the second one. And the value of doing this is it's going to inspire different ideas naturally. It's going to inspire different things by doing that. Ones that you wouldn't have thought about. That's what's so valuable about having a prompt. Thinking of something, because you connect to that something. And if you really let yourself connect to it, just not think about it at the top of your head, but let yourself connect to it, then there's a whole different thing that can happen with the music, because something different is happening in you, the player. So we decided to add a few other things to it because I still couldn't feel what actually was evolving to what. So we talked about certain things like anticipation, and then that would lead to the other part of the line in a certain kind of way. And he brought up the word foreshadowing, meaning should the phrase before all the change or the next level of intensity or part or movement or quality that we're going for, should there be hints of it before we actually arrive there? And the word foreshadowing really got my attention. It really, really did. And if you look in the dictionary, one of the things it says, a warning about something that's coming in the future. In this case, it wasn't a warning. It was just the natural living part of life that you can tell stages of development. And from those stages, possibly what's coming after. You can look in the natural world. You can see that with trees and all different kinds of plants. They start at a level and they're at this stage and that stage. You can see it with human beings. And there's certain patterns that develop. At the same time, just take a side note here, people have made systems out of phrasing. Some people really think theoretically based. Well, this chord is leading to this chord, and that's, coming away from, and this quality of sound, you have to make sure that this is pressing this way, and then it comes away according to the harmonic structure. I personally don't think that way at all, even though I compose a lot of music. I don't think that way. But some do, and they do it very, very well because they're still playing with certain kinds of expression. Other people have created systems out of phrasing, like the number system, where they have different numbers. Let's say you start on 3, and the phrase goes along as it builds, it crescendos, it goes to a 4, and then maybe a 4.5, and then it comes down a little bit. And so there's a really connected sense of how things grow and how things then relax. So there's a tension and a release, and how to do it in a certain very smooth transitional way. Now, not all life is that way, as we know. Some things are pretty subito, and they change quickly. And sometimes you have feelings about those changes before they happen. So this word foreshadowing was very interesting to me in relation to what we were talking about the connecting the phrases. So I said, well, he was actually thinking about his grandmother for the first time, or going to his grandparents' home, which he really liked to do as a kid. So there was a strong connection there. And I wasn't going to then tell him with that, how can you say, well, no, this is the way this phrase goes? No, he's going to his grandmother's house. He loves going there. And so somewhere along the line it was brought up, well, what about on the ride on the way there? Now, if you put that, wow, part of this is the ride on the way there, it's filled with anticipating or foreshadowing. Oh, you can taste the cookies. You can see the smile on your grandmother's face. Maybe you can feel the sternness of grandpa, if that's the kind of grandparents that you have, or whatever. But overall, there was a feeling of joy. So once that was kind of added in, and that feeling of the ride over, things were very different in terms of the connecting from one part of the phrase to the other. And this is why I was caught on that word foreshadowing. Now, let's look at this. If we're going to play a Bordoni etude, these are one of the etudes that people just think you can pull it out of the closet of your mind, like, or the cupboard of your mind, like someone pulls out a can of Chef, Boyardee out of the cupboard because there's nothing else to eat. And, it'll fill you up, and you kind of like it, actually. You're not, you know what I mean? Kind of like it. And even though they basically all taste the same, you heat it up, and it's pretty quick. Not a lot of thought goes into it. Not a lot of feeling about what is this about. And therefore, the foreshadowing that would happen in a piece like that with the phrasing could just sound like ready-made and not alive. Because there's actually not a sense of wanting to communicate something. It's just a matter, we'll just pop it in ourselves and crank out another Chef Bordoni. That's the value of playing something different. And the value of just not technically playing it different or just with dynamics. Think of a person, someone you like, someone you don't like, a family member, a friend. Think of a pet. Think of different animals. Think of different parts of life, a mountain, a tree, clouds in the sky, fish in the ocean, or fish in a lake. Think of a stream or a lake. All these different parts of life, you'd never get bored. Think of different scenarios. And the music would always have a slightly different inclination. Now, if it doesn't, if the vibratory aspect of the music does not change when you're thinking those different things, it tells you how hardwired those habits are. And as we know, and I'm talking from personal experience, habits can be very hardwired and hard to change. So if we think of a different thing and we really tap into it, and we're still doing certain things the same for each time we change the style in which we're playing, that says something. So it's the value of recording yourself on these things. So the next student came in, was working on the Schulich, and we had talked about it the week before, and we had experimented with different things, and for example, thought about that intricate piano part in the beginning as the mystical part of Gabriel. And that the voice would be the person who's playing the solo part, the trombone, saying whatever they would want to say to Gabriel, whatever questions or feelings they'd have. And this person was playing it very well. And we thought there was something missing. We talked about it a bit. And I said, really make that story vivid for you. Vivid in the sense that if everything you play is really saying something, there cannot be a dead note. There can't be all of a sudden a note that just goes like this. It would have to be a part of the communication, a part of the story, a part of the poem, a part of the oratory. And so after we got into it again, and he played it again, was really different. There was a whole different part of his self in the music as an engaged part of the musical expression. And I said, well, how did that feel? He said, really, really different. He said, I felt more or really invested in the piece. So that word caught me. How invested do we want to be in our music making? How much personal responsibility do we want to take to that? And that's sometimes when listening to too many CDs. It's good to get different ideas, for sure. But once in a while, let yourself create the different ideas by looking at the world around you and taking an aspect or taking an experience of the day that happened to you. Or pretend it's in a movie. Pretend you're reading something when you're playing it, and you're telling it to someone else about what happened to someone else. So maybe that might feel like a lot to juggle. But once you have thought about the piece and built a relationship of it to the degree that a lot of the technical commands are more in your automatic system, and hopefully at the same time you're asking yourself, what is this saying to me? Even before you know exactly what you want musically, you'll be able to have a very, very different outcome with thinking of things in different ways, and it won't seem like such an impossible juggling act. So, being invested in what you're doing and just not relying on recordings, someone else's investment, to get into you as the only backdrop for how you want to do something, even if you love it so much what they're doing. And some people really play some things really convincingly that you want to do. I'm humbled to say that I know many people before they're going to play Mahler 7, they listen to my recording with the BSO that was recorded a long time ago, 1989. I think it was put out in 1990. And I was playing euphonium on the tenor tuba part. And a lot of people say, oh, we're doing Mahler 7, and I keep listening to your recording. And that's touching, because I feel I had a very powerful connection to Mahler 7. But still, they have to make it real for them. They have to make it real for them. So, Teacher's Log, video 2. And perhaps you want to give some thought about foreshadowing and invested. Or ask yourself about your phrasing, thinking of foreshadowing. Because sometimes one little difference in a word or approach, suddenly you see things very differently. You can ask yourself how invested you are in trying anything new.